What you are about to hear was never meant to be spoken aloud, and certainly never meant to be taught openly, because mandalas were not created as spiritual decoration, meditation art, or aesthetic symbolism the way modern culture has dangerously simplified them. They were designed as operational diagrams, encoded respiratory machines, visual mechanisms meant to control the most powerful system in your body without you ever realizing it: your breath. I am telling you this directly because you have been lied to, softly, politely, for decades. You were told mandalas calm the mind, that they are symbolic representations of the universe, that they are tools for relaxation. That is a partial truth, and partial truths are the most effective form of suppression. In reality, mandalas are geometric breathing blueprints, forbidden interfaces that ancient civilizations used to regulate heart rate, blood chemistry, neural oscillations, and altered states of consciousness with terrifying precision. You were never supposed to look at them passively. You were supposed to breathe with them. Every ring, every radial line, every repeating symmetry was engineered to pace inhalation, suspension, exhalation, and retention, in ratios that modern neuroscience has only begun to rediscover. This is why these drawings appear across cultures that never contacted each other, from Himalayan monasteries to pre-Columbian stonework, from tantric scrolls to desert carvings. Geometry was their language, breath was the command, and consciousness was the target. When you stare at a mandala, your visual cortex locks onto symmetry, your eye movements slow, your blink rate drops, and without instruction, your breathing begins to entrain. This is not mysticism. This is neurophysiology. But here's the dangerous part they never told you. Once breath rhythm shifts, blood CO2 levels change, vagal tone increases, and the brain transitions into theta-dominant states where memory, fear, identity, and time perception soften. That state is powerful. That state is programmable. That is why mandalas were restricted to initiates, priests, and trained adepts. An untrained mind breathing incorrectly while exposed to these patterns could destabilize emotionally, dissociate, or flood the nervous system. So the knowledge was buried under the word art. You, right now, are breathing in a way that keeps you anxious, fragmented, and neurologically inefficient. And the solution has been hiding in plain sight, flattened onto museum walls, and meditation apps, with the instruction manual removed. I am not introducing you to something new. I am reconnecting you to something deliberately disconnected. This is the beginning of understanding mandalas, not as symbols, but as breathing machines that were always meant to breathe you back. You are living inside a quiet physiological crisis, and no one has warned you because it does not look dramatic from the outside. You are breathing all day, every day, yet your nervous system is slowly starving, misfiring, and compensating in ways that feel normal only because you have never experienced anything else. Short breaths, shallow chest movement, irregular pauses, unconscious breath holding while staring at screens. This is not harmless. This pattern traps your body in a constant low-grade threat response, where cortisol becomes background noise and anxiety feels like personality. You think your stress comes from work, from relationships, from uncertainty, but that is the surface story. Beneath it, your respiratory rhythm is chaotic, disconnected from visual input, disconnected from posture, disconnected from neural timing. Ancient systems understood something modern life ignores. Breathing does not operate alone. It is designed to synchronize with what you see. When that synchronization breaks, the brain loses coherence. Mandalas were never optional decoration in those cultures because they solved a problem you are drowning in now. They provided an external geometric metronome when the internal one collapsed. Without it, your breath speeds up under pressure, your exhale shortens, carbon dioxide drops too fast, blood vessels constrict, and the brain interprets this as danger. This is why you feel restless, even when nothing is wrong. Why meditation feels difficult. Why silence makes you uncomfortable. Your nervous system has forgotten how to settle because it has no visual anchor to slow the breath naturally. You are told to breathe deeply, which is vague, dangerous advice when not structured, because deeper is not calmer if rhythm is wrong. Mandalas impose rhythm without force. They guide the eyes, which guide the breath, which guide the brain. When this loop is missing, you compensate with stimulants, distractions, constant motion. You scroll, you snack, you seek noise. Not because you are weak, but because your physiology is unstable. This is the stake. Continue breathing the way you do now, and no amount of mindfulness language will save you from chronic sympathetic dominance. The mandala is not a spiritual luxury. It is a corrective device for a system that has lost its timing. And once you see that, you cannot unsee how badly you need it. Now we move into the mechanism. Because belief is irrelevant here, and understanding is everything. The reason mandalas work is not because they are beautiful, sacred, or symbolic, but because the human nervous system is mathematically predictable when exposed to stable geometry. Your brain is an oscillating system. Your breath is an oscillating system. And when two oscillators are placed in proximity, they synchronize. This is a law of physics, not spirituality. When your eyes track radial symmetry, the visual cortex begins firing in repeating, predictable loops. Those loops project directly into the thalamus, which acts like a central timing hub, and from there into the autonomic centers that regulate breathing and heart rate. At the same time, slow, symmetrical eye movement activates the parasympathetic branch through the vagus nerve, the same nerve that controls digestion, emotional regulation, and cardiac rhythm. Here is the critical point most people never learn. Breath does not calm the brain first. Vision does. Vision sets rhythm. Rhythm shapes breath. Breath alters blood chemistry, and blood chemistry determines neural state. Mandalas exploit this chain reaction. As your gaze moves outward and inward along concentric patterns, your inhale naturally lengthens on expansion, and your exhale deepens on contraction. This shifts carbon dioxide tolerance upward, allowing oxygen to be released more efficiently to the brain and muscles. As CO2 stabilizes instead of being blown off through anxious overbreathing, cerebral blood flow increases, and the brain slips into theta-dominant activity. Theta is the gateway frequency. It is where memory becomes plastic, where emotional charge loosens, where learning accelerates, and where the sense of self becomes flexible. This is why mandalas were used before rituals, initiations, and altered state practices. They prepared the nervous system without force. They did not command the breath. They entrained it. Modern neuroscience describes this as coherence between sensory input and autonomic output. Ancient cultures described it as alignment. Different language, same mechanism. Without this coherence, breathing techniques feel effortful and fragile. With it, the body reorganizes itself automatically. The mandala does not calm you. It reorganizes timing at every level, from eye muscles to diaphragm to brainstem. That is the mechanism. And once you understand it, you realize why random breathing exercises fail while geometry endures. The discovery that mandalas encoded breathing ratios was not an accident, and it was not intuitive in the way modern people imagine intuition. It was the result of generations of observation, restriction, and ruthless refinement. Ancient practitioners did not sit around speculating about consciousness. They experimented directly on the nervous system using the only tools available to them: breath, posture, vision, and time. They noticed something unsettling early on. When novices stared into repetitive radial forms during rituals, their breathing changed even when no instruction was given. Inhalations stretched, pauses appeared, exhalations slowed, heartbeats dropped. Trance arrived faster and deeper. This frightened and fascinated them. So they began encoding structure into the drawings themselves. Rings were spaced to match respiratory phases. Pedal counts mirrored inhale-to-exhale ratios. Central points were not symbolic centers of the universe, but fixation anchors designed to induce stillness at the exact moment breath naturally suspends. Over time, entire breathing protocols were embedded visually, so they could be transmitted without words, without teachers, without risk of corruption through language. This is why mandalas survived when other techniques were lost. A drawing cannot be mispronounced. It cannot be mistranslated. But here is where suppression enters. Once religious institutions and later political powers realized that these diagrams could alter obedience, identity, and emotional stability, access became controlled. Mandalas were reframed as sacred art, not functional tools. Their use was ritualized, aestheticized, stripped of operational context. By the time modern scholars encountered them, the instruction layer was gone, leaving only symbolism to analyze. What you are seeing now in museums is a corpse of a technology, beautiful but inert. The living function required breath synchronization, timing, and deliberate visual pacing. Without that, you are only admiring the shell. Ancient cultures understood that breath is power, and power must be gated. That is why these diagrams were hidden in temples, initiation chambers, and manuscripts few could access. You were never meant to stumble upon them casually, while distracted, and breathing incorrectly. And yet here you are, unknowingly exposed to a system designed for trained nervous systems. Wondering why staring at certain patterns makes you feel calm, disoriented, or strangely focused. That reaction is not imagination. It is the residue of a protocol still whispering through geometry, waiting for breath to catch up. There is a lock inside your nervous system, and mandalas were engineered to open it without force, without drugs, without external authority. That lock is the coordination between your eyes, your diaphragm, and your brainstem. Modern life has shattered this coordination. Your eyes jump erratically across flat screens. Your breath adapts by becoming shallow and irregular, and the brainstem responds by staying alert, vigilant, never fully settling. Ancient designers noticed that when eye movement becomes smooth, slow, and symmetrical, something profound happens beneath awareness. The muscles around the eyes send rhythmic signals through cranial nerves that converge with respiratory centers in the medulla. This creates a coupling effect. Eye rhythm stabilizes breath rhythm. Mandalas exploit this by offering no sharp edges, no sudden visual interruptions, only predictable symmetry that invites continuous tracking. As your gaze follows the geometry, microsaccades reduce, blink rate drops, and the diaphragm begins to move in longer, more efficient arcs. This is not voluntary control. It is automatic entrainment. When breath lengthens without strain, the vagus nerve increases its tone, slowing the heart and shifting the body out of defensive mode. At the same time, stable breathing raises tolerance to carbon dioxide, which most people fear unconsciously because modern overbreathing has trained the brain to associate CO2 with suffocation. Mandalas reverse that conditioning gently. They allow CO2 to rise just enough to trigger vasodilation, increasing blood flow to the brain and creating a feeling of grounded clarity instead of panic. This is the neurological lock opening. You feel present, but not tense, focused, but not effortful. This state was essential for ancient rites because it made the mind receptive, not resistant. It softened rigid identity without collapsing awareness. Today, you chase this state through caffeine, meditation apps, and endless techniques, not realizing that the missing component is visual coherence. Breath alone is unstable without a visual pacer. Mandalas provide that pacer. They synchronize what modern life has torn apart. And once this lock opens, the nervous system remembers a mode of operation it has not used in years. Now we arrive at the protocol. And this is where attention becomes non-negotiable, because doing this incorrectly reduces the mandala back into decoration and turns a precise instrument into noise. You do not sit casually. You do not glance. You do not multitask. You place the mandala at eye level, far enough that your entire field of vision can rest inside it without strain. Your spine is upright, not rigid, because posture determines how freely the diaphragm can move. Before you begin, you do nothing heroic with your breath. No deep inhale. No forceful exhale. You simply notice how chaotic it already is. That awareness alone is diagnostic. Then you choose a single path within the mandala, usually a ring or a repeating radial sequence, and you let your eyes move along it slowly, deliberately, as if tracing it from the inside outward. As your gaze expands, you allow the inhale to happen naturally, not bigger, just longer. When your eyes reach the outer edge, you pause, not by holding the breath aggressively, but by allowing the natural suspension that appears when the inhale completes without urgency. Then, as your gaze returns inward along the same path, you let the exhale follow, unforced, extended, smooth. At the center point, you rest again for a brief moment, eyes still, breath quiet. That is one cycle. Nothing else matters. No counting, no mantra, no correction. The mandala is doing the timing for you. After several cycles, the breath will begin to lengthen on its own. You will feel warmth in the chest, a subtle pressure behind the eyes, a drop in mental noise. This is correct. If dizziness appears, you are forcing depth instead of allowing rhythm. If restlessness appears, your gaze is jumping instead of flowing. The protocol is simple, but unforgiving. Precision comes from surrendering control, not adding effort. Ancient practitioners understood this paradox deeply. The mandala is not a tool you use. It is a structure you submit to temporarily, so your nervous system can reorganize itself without interference. Do this for 3 to 5 minutes only at first. More is not better. Better is better. This is not relaxation. This is recalibration. Once this protocol is executed correctly, the changes begin far below conscious awareness, at a level most people never consider, and this is where the real power hides. As breath rhythm stabilizes, and visual input remains coherent, the brainstem shifts control away from emergency circuits and into maintenance mode. This is when biochemical cascades activate automatically. Brain-derived neurotrophic factor begins to increase, not dramatically all at once, but steadily, quietly, like reinforcing wiring that has been brittle for years. BDNF is not a mystical substance. It is the fertilizer of neural plasticity. It determines whether your brain can adapt or whether it remains locked in repetitive loops of anxiety and fatigue. At the same time, oxygen delivery improves not because you are breathing more, but because you are breathing correctly. Hemoglobin releases oxygen more efficiently when carbon dioxide levels are balanced, and that balance is restored through slow, rhythmic exhalation guided by the mandala's geometry. Cells shift from inefficient glycolytic stress patterns toward more stable mitochondrial respiration. You may feel this as warmth, as clarity, as a subtle sense of internal order returning. The autonomic nervous system begins recalibrating its baseline. Heart rate variability increases, which is one of the strongest measurable indicators of resilience and longevity. Digestion improves. Muscle tension softens without conscious relaxation. This is not placebo. This is physiology responding to coherence. Perhaps most importantly, the limbic system quiets its constant threat scanning. Fear signals lose volume. Emotional reactions slow just enough for choice to return. Ancient cultures describe this as entering a receptive state, a condition where learning imprints deeply and identity becomes malleable without fragmentation. Modern neuroscience describes it as a shift toward parasympathetic dominance with preserved alertness. Different words, same reality. What matters is that this state cannot be forced and cannot be faked. It emerges only when breath, vision, and posture are aligned. The mandala is the catalyst, but your nervous system does the work. This is why results feel earned rather than imagined. Something fundamental is being rebuilt, quietly, beneath thought. The transformation does not arrive all at once, and if it did, it would be unstable and dangerous. Instead, the nervous system reveals its changes on a strict timeline, and this is how you know this process is real. Within the first 3 minutes of correct mandala-guided breathing, heart rate drops measurably, peripheral vision softens, and mental noise decreases. This is the acute phase where coherence replaces chaos temporarily. You feel it, but it fades if you stop. After 7 days of daily practice, even at only 3 to 5 minutes per session, baseline breathing begins to change outside of practice. You notice longer natural exhales, fewer unconscious breath holds, and a subtle increase in emotional patience. This is the adaptation phase. The vagus nerve is being trained, not stimulated. By day 14, sleep architecture improves. Falling asleep becomes easier, and awakenings during the night decrease because carbon dioxide tolerance has risen enough to prevent stress spikes during hypoxic microevents. By day 21, the shift becomes structural. Heart rate variability stabilizes at a higher range. Focus deepens without effort. Reactivity decreases without suppression. This is integration. At this stage, the mandala is no longer needed as often because the nervous system has internalized the rhythm it once borrowed externally. Ancient practitioners recognized this point clearly. The diagram was a teacher, not a crutch. Once the breath learned the geometry, the body carried it forward into movement, speech, and stillness. If nothing changes for you by day 7, the protocol is being rushed or aestheticized. The body does not lie about timing. It adapts when conditions are correct. This timeline is not motivational. It is diagnostic. Now comes the part that was always whispered, never announced, because this is where responsibility shifts onto you. Mandalas were suppressed not because they were ineffective, but because they were effective without authority. They did not require permission, hierarchy, substances, or belief. They bypassed doctrine and went straight to the nervous system, and that made them dangerous to any structure that relied on fear, agitation, or dependency. A calm, coherent nervous system is hard to control. A person whose breath is stable does not panic easily, does not obey blindly, does not need constant stimulation to feel alive. That is the real reason this knowledge was diluted into art history and spiritual decoration. You were allowed to admire the surface, but never taught the function. And now, you have a choice. You can treat this as interesting information, another forgotten curiosity, or you can recognize the challenge embedded in it. 3 minutes a day, no more, no less, no excuses. Sit with the mandala. Let it pace your eyes. Let your breath fall into alignment. Do not chase visions. Do not seek transcendence. Seek coherence. That alone is revolutionary. The warning is simple. Misuse comes from impatience. Force comes from ego. If you try to dominate the breath, you destabilize yourself. If you submit to rhythm, you rebuild yourself. Ancient systems did not hide this because it was mystical. They hid it because it was powerful and subtle and easy to corrupt. Now the gate is open again, but the test remains the same. Can you slow down enough to let your nervous system relearn what geometry has been trying to teach you all along? The mandala is waiting. It always has been.